I had the opportunity to speak with Melza Harvey after seeing her exhibition at the McClure Gallery by the school where I take drawing classes, actually. Her show was called Craft Mechanics. And she works with clay, so she's trained as a ceramicist, integrates many other materials with the clay, and creates really quite fun pieces that you can actually interact with in the gallery, which is a whole thing in itself because we're so used to being told not to touch in galleries and museums. Melza and I talked about her experiences as someone who is gender fluid, what she shares about herself through her work, some of what I thought are very brave choices that she made to develop herself and pursue her own passions as a person and as an artist and also as a parent, and how both determination and fear have helped guide her along her way through her development. So here's my conversation with Melza. And thank you, Melza, for coming to do this with me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
I had the great pleasure of seeing your exhibit at the Visual Arts Center in the McClure Gallery. And I walked up to the first piece and it had like a switch on it. So just by instinct, I reached out and I switched the switch. And then I was like, don't touch, you're not supposed to. And I looked around, I'm like, did anybody see me do that?
I love that. That's why I did the little manual for people who don't have that instinct like you, who are so ingrained to go into a gallery and don't touch anything. Right. I felt like that the manual is almost like a permission slip. Like, really? Can I? Yes, you can. And if you need to refer to a booklet to give you the permission, that's what it's there for.
Well, I did immediately look around for somebody to say, okay, please somebody say that this is okay, because I have a feeling I just messed something up, but I wasn't thinking. It was completely instinctual.
Well, the sound of the sculpture probably didn't help that feeling either, because it's not exactly a soundscape.
No, well, there were a couple with switches. Like one was for light.
Yeah.
One was like for the whirring.
Yeah.
Like a whirring sound. And yeah, no, it was exceptional. So I'm like, who's this person that Mel's? Okay, I'm going to just reach out and see if she'd be willing to talk to me. And if I was going to introduce you, because I did look you up and it says you're a ceramicist, but is that how you describe yourself as an artist?
Well, I definitely have teetered into some more materials other than ceramics. Okay. So I feel a little more comfortable. If I had to put a label on it, I'd say I'm an artist first. My preferred material is ceramics. I'm really delving into other things, but ceramics is where I'm professionally trained. I feel uber good in clay. I'm very excited about clay. I feel like I have a relationship with clay that I've developed over a long, long time.
Okay, so I am going to go with my first question originally planned, which was, when did you start working with clay and why clay?
I first got a bag of clay at the Emily Carr Center. I lived for a small amount of time in Vancouver, and I was feeling so lost. Before being an artist, I was a mental health professional. I was working in these drop-in centers in downtown Vancouver, and it was a very difficult time in my life. It was like living so far away from home for the first time, and every day meeting these new faces and trying to help people and just seeing the dire position some people were in. And so I got this clay and I just started intuitively sculpting these little faces. I don't know why. I don't even know why I picked up that first bag of clay. I'd always liked to draw and I was never felt I was very good at it. And then when I got into clay, it just seemed to sort of come, just putting things in 3D, just sort of really brought it into real life for me. And it reminded me too, my grandmother used to collect these little figurines that came in. I don't know if it was boxes of tea bags or what, but there were these like little miniatures. They were made in ceramic, and I used to play with them when I was little. And just this having some tiny little object was just kind of fascinating. So I don't know if that's really a start. That's the first time I really touched clay. And then I sort of made that more of a career path when I was here in Montreal, and it was quite a cultural shock for me. And I had a really tough time. I was taking the government French classes to become bilingual, and I was working in a law office downtown that was just like sucking my soul. At a certain point, I was sort of given an out, the option to leave my job and be given like papers that I could get unemployment. So I took it because I was like, I cannot do this. And so at that point in my life, I was like, what am I going to do? I really need to, seeing what experience I had working in this law atmosphere was really scary for me. I couldn't go back into psychology because my bilingualism was just not there. I was reading these self-help books to try to help me choose a path. I had read somewhere like, think back to when you were a child. What activities did you do when you were really little that you really lost yourself, that that you just loved? And I remember I went through this particularly long phase of playing in this like dough made with flour, salt, and water. That's all it was. I used to mix up batches and batches of this and make these droopy little figurines and cook them in the microwave. And then I'd paint them, and then they'd get moldy. So I'd make some more. So yeah, I had this very visceral memory of that. I decided to go back to school and did the program through Bon Secours, which is a ceramics school in Old Montreal.
I think that's a brave choice because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and say, so what would I do next? And maybe unfortunately for me, I'd say, what's the next practical thing that I can do to make sure that I can, I don't know, pay my rent? Or that's just, it's a silly response, but I think it's brave when people can say, I'm going to rethink my path up till now.
Yeah.
And actually reach back and find something that I was passionate about and pursue that instead. That's not that
It didn't
common.
happen all in one clean chop either. It was really an extremely long progression to where I am now, because the ceramic school was very technical. It was production pottery. It was a very strict technique, and I actually had never been exposed to arts or anything like that. And I remember one particular exercise we were giving, we had to throw a series. And so I threw this series, and I had this brainwave theme, and I set all my vessels up so that they created this shape, the silhouette of a brainwave. And then on each vessel, I had like a different brainwave. And then you could flip it over and see like, oh, this is sleep. And like, oh, this one's anger. And oh, like all the different kinds of brainwaves. And my teacher at the time, he was like, this is sculpture that you're doing. Because I had wanted to present it in this very specific way. And I was floored. I was like, it's what? So that started kind of like piquing my interest. And I did go to Concordia, where I actually majored in ceramics and took sculpture classes and studied art. But it's been like nothing happened in a straight line. It was a lot of going back and forth. Like being an artist, the double guessing yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Oh, like, should I keep doing this? And the wavering. And it really takes a special kind of determination, and also a special kind of fear. Because I feel like so much of my existence is wrapped up in being an artist, not just making art, but like being an artist. This is how I live. And even if I didn't create, it wouldn't stop me from being who I am. So I think that as creatives, it's sort of like we have the responsibility to ourselves to push ourselves in that direction as much as we feasibly can.
You said something I want to go back to about the fear. because I was reading something this morning and they were talking about positive emotions and negative emotions, and positive ones are things like confidence and happiness, and the negative ones are things like anxiety and fear. And I kind of stopped and I was like, I don't think it's quite that simple, right? Because sometimes fear is the motivation to do something, or it leads us to
Absolutely.
question, or it makes us maybe doubt one path or choose one path. And so could you just talk a little bit more about how fear was somehow helped you make that choice around being an artist?
Yeah. So when I was working in that law office, I felt so I was like, is this really what it's supposed to be for me? Like, is this really my life? Because I'm terrified that this is all there is. And it can't be all that there is because I'm not going to survive because depression will take over because I can't be who I am in this environment. And going back the other way, the fear, like choosing to be an artist, is like, can I really survive? Can I keep putting my personal investment into myself this way? It feels so selfish. Like I have children, I'm trying to raise people here. I want to take them on vacation. I want to send them to summer camp. I want to do all the things. And so it's these choices that we make every day, little by little, and sometimes I worry, am I doing the right thing? But then I think, you know what? I'm raising these kids, right? It's so important that they see me try, that they see me work, that they see me go through all this for who? For me. I'm not doing this for somebody else. I'm doing all of this for me. And I want them to see that this is about my life. This is about the progression of where I've come from and where I'm going. Because I got a pretty late start in the game on this. I was never exposed to art growing up, didn't go to galleries or, museums were more like history, science museums, had no clue about anything like that and never took art in school. You look at artists who have established careers, they've worked hard. This is not a suddenly famous type of thing to become an artist. This is something you slowly, slowly work on and develop yourself as well as your work.
So I want to reiterate the brave thing because everything that you just described was really making some choices that are not the easy choices to
Totally.
make, especially in the context of raising a family and being responsible for other small humans.
Yeah.
So
Do you have kids, may I ask?
I do. I have a son who's 22.
Okay.
Yeah. And you have,
I have three.
I have three
Yeah.
cats. I know. Three children is a whole different story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so you're responsible. So it's that double whammy of you're responsible for other small people at the same time, like you said, you're doing this development for yourself. So you're putting your needs and your desires for who you want to be foremost. And as
Well,
an
it's
example,
funny.
as
Yeah, because I kind of I feel so, you know, it feels so selfish to hear it like that. And if I could just say that if I were to flip it and be like, if I don't do that, what kind of a person am I being to raise those kids? You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
I don't mean it in a selfish way at all. I
no,
think it's a bit like how we've been trained to think you can't touch something, you can't
yeah,
touch a piece of art, you can't put yourself first. That's a selfish thing to
I
do. It
know.
sounds bad. And then the
Yeah,
flip side, exactly like you said, is you don't want to raise kids and as an example, be not doing the things that are most fulfilling.
that's right. We spend so much time telling our kids, be yourself. Do you know what I mean? Be yourself. Pursue your interests and like really come into yourself. And what would I be if I were to be at some kind of a job that contradicted everything I stand for? So, in
No.
many ways, I feel like I don't have a choice, which feels weird and scary too, because I have a lot invested in this. And sometimes I think about that, like if I were to break my arms tomorrow and I couldn't do this anymore, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about stuff like that. But it's a reminder of, okay, okay, yeah, making art is means a lot to me, but it's not everything I am. I'm more than that. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. I'm going back now. Now we're at question number two. Do you think? So I did want to ask you, and it doesn't have to center on the exhibit that I saw, because I read a little bit about it. So I have some ideas maybe about what you were doing in that show, but it could be in general. What are some of the themes that you explore through your artwork?
First and foremost, my art comes from a very personal place. I'm a queer person. I'm gender fluid. I have children. I'm a feminist. I base a lot of my work on my personal experience and how I see the world, what I value. I'm spiritual. I'm very anti racist. So my work comes from experiences that I have that I don't necessarily want to write it out for people because I want to bring people in and leave enough room for them to have their own thoughts. I want to share it in a way that it's not just mine, but it can be yours too. It's like an opening to receive people who want to project onto that whatever it is they need to in order to access whatever feelings that brings out for them.
So can you talk a bit about this exhibit then in that context, just to give sort of a practical.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So Craft Mechanics is the name of the show. And when I started making this work, I was thinking about being gender fluid. I have a very female shape. I'm very round. I'm a very curvy person. And when I tell people I'm gender fluid and that I'm feeling that I'm trying to have a more masculine presentation, I get a lot of comments like, "Oh, well, but you're so feminine. But your face is so feminine. You could never." And it's so frustrating because why is it that my external form dictates who I am on the inside? Nobody can see what I am or what I feel on the inside. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Let's take some of these stereotypical masculine forms and feminine forms. So I'm taking these basic raw forms, curvy, bulbous, organic, mixed with industrial, straight, hard, geometric, and I'm like, let's squish them together. Like, can I have a form that's fluid? What does that look like? Can I create a new vocabulary, a visual vocabulary that speaks to my internal experience of fluidity? And so the car parts come from my dad, who is the mechanic, and I use social engagement in one of my installations where we use makeup to like write on plates. My mom was a cosmetician. And so it's a little personal bow to my parents, because I grew up in rural Nova Scotia in the 90s, and it was a very polarized view of gender. Being in a cis female body, I was like hyper femme, you know what I mean? Like high school, and I'm like full makeup to school every day, full like glam makeup going to school, like you know. But that's what we did, because heaven forbid someone think you're a dyke. It was such a homophobic atmosphere that going into the ultra feminine was almost like camouflaging, so that you could just blend in because you didn't want to stand out or be like named as something that could be perceived as gay,
Wrong.
queer, or wrong, or any of that. And so, thinking about the sculptures again, just to bring it back to the use of electronics and sound. So, for me, I've driven used cars my whole life. It's almost like ingrained in me that that's a value. You don't buy a new car. The minute you roll it off the lot, it loses its value. So, the first thing something's wrong with your car is you're like, oh, what? Wait, what's that sound? Do you hear that? There's something not quite right here. So this is sort of like the feeling I want to create in my sculptures of like, is this normal? Is this okay? And in this context, yeah, it is. It's perfectly okay. You know what? It might sound a little off might sound a little crazy, unexpected, yes, but welcomed for sure, because it's just about having fun and finding ways for the ceramics to vibrate and to throw the sound further. And yeah.
It was a lot of fun. And I tried, I think after the first flicking of the switch, I was like, and then somebody pulled out the manual and I'm like, I'm not looking at that. I actually don't want to look at that yet. I don't want to read any of I don't want to know anything. I just want to go and play with the things. And I played with things. And then somebody said like, oh, she had been at the talk about the show and so she said the thing about the masculine forms and the feminine forms, which I completely missed. Like on no level did that, whatever. I just was having fun. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, oh, which are the ones that are plugged in somewhere? I'm going to those ones and try to do some stuff. But I guess it works on many different levels for somebody like me who just kind of walks in and says, this is really cool. And
Yeah.
then other people read more about what some of your intention might have been. And then that helps after. Because after I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like I see like car part
But I
things
think
and
that's great if people don't want an explanation because after all, what is gender? It's an expression. It can be a fun, lighthearted adventure. And I want that for some people. Not all art has to be doom and gloom, serious, and if you want more, then you can find more.
I had been thinking a little bit about what it means to get it. So if somebody's created a piece of art, does it matter if I get it? Is there an it? Do I get it? Can I experience it in a different way? Somebody else might experience it in a different way. The artist might have had a certain intention, or they might not get it. And if I'm creating something, if I'm writing something, or I've drawn something, do I have to get it? And for somebody who comes from a background like me, who's super logical, super rational, super scientific, got to understand, got to write about it, got to think about it, understand it, it's a bit of a jump for me to kind of say, I don't get it. And it doesn't matter. No, maybe to some people it will. And for some things, maybe it would for me. But your show, I was just like, I was right in there just flipping switches.
And did you get it?
No, I just had fun, actually. I just enjoyed
But
it.
that you totally got it. You totally got it. Like that's just it. I mean, when you put something out into the world, it's like your kids. You can't control that. Like it's its own thing. It's going to do its own thing. It's going to interact with other people and they're going to come up with something that's like that you're not even involved. And that's the best feeling. Like it has been the best feeling to put this body of work out there and be like, hey, have fun. I love that part.
I am going to circle back
Uh-oh, here we
because
go.
I know, because there's the big question. I think we've pretty much covered
Mhm.
in our own way a lot of what we had kind of mapped out to talk about. But I do want to come back and ask you sort of very explicitly what vulnerability means to you as a
Oh,
person, as an
yes.
artist.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me this because vulnerability is not to be confused with barfing your trauma. I think a lot of people think that splailing yourself out and just like pouring out your soul is vulnerability. But for me, and I'm just going to speak for me, vulnerability has more to do with what have I processed and what are my boundaries? Because I'm a connector. I love people and I feel like at home in my heart when I'm feeling I'm connecting with someone and talking about something deep, not just how's the weather and blah, blah, blah. So I can be very vulnerable with people one on one, but in different atmospheres, I can also be very reserved because for me, vulnerability is about what do I want to give and who do I want to give it to? That's why art's perfect for me because especially abstract art because I know what it means to me and I know what it meant when I conceived it, felt it and made it and somebody else can look at that and never know. But if we use that piece of art as a common point to join, and then I can open up, or if somebody else opens up, then vulnerability can have a landmark place in that artwork, which I think is what I can give to the world, you know? And it doesn't mean I have to tell everybody every painful thing I've ever been through, but yet I can share in a way that's comfortable, that doesn't make me feel icky when I walk away from it. And I feel like that's one area that I've really matured a lot in my life, because I used to tell people too much too soon. And I haven't had a very typical life. I've had a lot of experiences. And people think that because certain parts of my life are rather public, that they can, like, for example, I have 3 children, and sometimes people I barely know feel comfortable enough to ask me about the conception of my children. And I find that incredibly difficult sometimes. And, there are times when I'm like, if I'm having a conversation with someone and it's private and we're sharing and there's a give and take, and I'm a very giving person. I can be very vulnerable with people. But there are other things where it's like there's a time and a place. And I'm learning more and more where to draw that line, because my life is not a spectacle for you to quizzically wonder about and probe me. That's not what I'm here for, and that's not what I want to give. So vulnerability for me is as much about choice as it is about truth. When I choose to share something, I'm very careful about who's listening and what am I giving through sharing that.
It's interesting because, and I spoke to somebody who talked about her circles of intimacy. So I think that's similar to what you're saying, where they're the outer circle. There's
Yeah.
only so much information you share. As you get closer and closer into a smaller circle, you'll share more. And so the discernment, the judgment around that is really important. I spoke to somebody who said, some of her drawings are very personal, but those she keeps in a drawer. Like, those are for her. Some she may show to close friends just to get feedback in a sense of, where she's at or what does this mean to you. But she doesn't exhibit those. She doesn't share those or sell those. And she goes, eventually they might. If I leave them in the drawer for long enough and I go back and I look and I see something looks interesting, I pull it out and maybe I do some different things to it, it becomes a different piece and it's sort of lost its power in a way over me. Then she can put it out. But this is something new then. So I'd like to think about vulnerability a little bit as a driver then, maybe. It's an inside driver. But if you're open in yourself to sense or get in touch with things that then motivate you to do a certain kind of work, they're in there, but they're not exposed. You're not exposed in that way, but they were the impetus for that work. Is that kind of what you are saying?
Well, I think it's more like how, your narrative can change as your life goes on. And so the further you get from, say, a trauma, the more you can have insight looking back on it and what you've learned. So I think for me, the vulnerability is more about, giving yourself that time to process and to integrate before sharing.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. It was super interesting for me.
Well, thank you so much. It was really fun for me too.